So I'm back, but this time with the dream team of the panel. So why don't we start by just going quickly to let each and everyone introduce themselves briefly as to what they do. Maybe we start at the end with Matteo and we work our way to me.
Sounds good. Thanks for having us. Matteo Gamba, I lead the product team for Wayfair from a payments and fraud perspective. Wayfair is a large enterprise merchant selling furniture and houseware in the US, Canada, UK, Germany, and Ireland. And my focus in relation to open banking has really been around the investigation of this payment method, this opportunity, and really trying to understand what can we do to find the right customer adoption, not just the merchant adoption.
All right, thanks for having me here. I'm Marius, I'm the Chief Executive of Connectpay. What we're doing is we're building solutions and enabling online businesses to embed financial services into their offering to either boost the user experience of their products or enable their businesses altogether.
Yeah. Hi everyone, I'm Rich Hall. I work for Barclaycard Payments. I lead a product team in our acquiring business, and I'm here today really because I was responsible for delivering our account-to-account payment initiation solution called BankPay.
Hi everyone, thank you for your invitation. So my name is Andrea Toucinho. I am Director of Studies, Perspective and Training of a French consulting company called Partelya Consulting. And I have also some activities at the EU level as Country Ambassador for France of European Women Payments Network and France representative of two national fintech associations, AFI Spain and AFI Portugal.
Hi everyone, I'm Olof. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer for Trusty. We are a provider of account-to-account payments in Europe and North America, I should say.
Thank you. And for myself, Daniel Kornitzer, I was at PaySafe for almost 20 years as Chief Product and Business Development Officer. I'm now advising several fintechs, including Tillo, which is a gifting management platform. Why don't we start with a question on the sort of the state of the union of open banking and open finance in Europe and then more specifically in the UK. Let's start with maybe Andrea and then Richard for that perspective on Europe and UK.
Okay, thank you for your question. So first of all, I think that it is important to remind that open banking is an international trend. You mentioned in your introduction the case of Brazil. It is a very interesting country in the field of open banking. We can mention also the case of the United States, Australia, or even Singapore. So the specificity of the European region in the field of open banking is that in this region, open banking is linked with a regulation, the PSD2. But despite this situation, we see a huge fragmentation with many strategies and many approaches in the field of open banking across Europe. So first of all, it is important to highlight that there are in Europe some proactive countries in the field of open banking. It is the case of UK. So UK has a very good implementation of open banking in the country. It is also the case of the Nordics with a very good maturity of consumers in the use of electronic means of payments. And also Luxembourg, a very interesting country in the field of open banking with the initiative LuxHub that is in charge of the implementation of open banking in the country. And thanks to a good maturity of the market, LuxHub is already working about the next step, open finance. Last but not least, some proactive countries also are in the south of Europe, like Spain and Portugal. In Spain, we saw that the great banks like BBVA, Santander, or even La Caixa launched very early their own APIs. And in Portugal, we had a very interesting strategy of the national payments actor SIPS with the launch of SIPS API market in 2019 to implement open banking in the country. So I think that it is important to have in mind these strong examples, and also to recognize that in Europe we have also some reluctancy. It is a case, for instance, of France. It has been very difficult in the beginning to work about open banking in France because of two reasons. The first one is the pressure of security, since the French payments market is very linked to an engagement in the field of security. And the second reason is the culture of payments cards. As you know, in France, people are very linked with cards, so it is very difficult to implement other means of payments. We have seen this situation also in the development of instant payments. So concerning this fragmentation in Europe, I think that a huge challenge to address for the next years will be the creation of a real pan-European vision in the field of open banking, and it will be a huge task to prepare the next step of open finance that is already identified by the European institutions.
Thanks, Andrea. Richard, for the...
Yeah, so in the UK, of course, I think focusing on payments in particular, there's a lot of publicity about the growth of payment volumes. So it's growing at sort of exponential rates. I think it's probably important to remember that we are sort of growing from a very small base, which kind of gets lost a little bit. But the sort of growth projections, I think, for the future are sort of really promising. There's some real sort of great use cases that we've seen out there. Of course, you know, some that we saw up there from Trustly, the HMRC one in particular, of course, is very sort of heavily publicised. But similar use cases as well, where people are making bill payments, are really starting to grow in traction, but also in other sort of areas and verticals as well. I think in the UK, of course, we've been helped, and the growth has been helped through the CMA order, and then the fact that when a consumer makes a payment using open banking, they go through a very similar experience. So we've got a uniform customer experience regardless of who they bank with. Not quite the same across the European markets yet, of course. So I think right now, it's a really interesting space. There's a long way to go. I think some of the sort of roadmap items and some of the developments like BRP, of course, again, another commonly spoken about theme, has great potential to help open banking grow in the UK going forward. So sort of still early stages, growing well, lots more still to do, I think.
Thank you. Let's get into the sort of the heart of open banking and have kind of a group discussion on is open banking falling behind or actually getting traction? In each of your views, what are the key obstacles, challenges, and trends in open banking? Things like, for example, the competition between merchants and some wallets to gain control over the user journey, the value proposition from a consumer perspective, the use of branded versus unbranded solutions, fraud issues, and even is open banking the catalyst for real-time payments? So there are a lot of interesting issues and questions. Why don't we start, maybe with Matteo and Marius first, and then we go on to the rest of the panel.
So I think as we saw, there are very valuable use cases that have shown that a solution like open banking can and is working, ideal in the Netherlands, something that most of the merchant would be able to, would want to be able to use. Low cost, wide adoption, good customer experience. Open banking in Europe is still a fragmented market, a fragmented solution. I don't know if we will ever get to the point where we're going to have this pan-European view of the world. I don't know if we need that even. But then going back to the consumer, I think that's really the core. What do we have to do as an industry to make sure that we can get this kind of adoption? I still don't see it as a payment method that customers come and ask for. It's like, where is my open banking, my way to pay with my bank account? And that's because they still have alternative payment methods in Europe that are good enough. It's not like where in Brazil you have boleto as the alternative and you have to go with a piece of paper and the user experience is 10 times better. We are debating against credit and debit cards that, yes, they have the additional friction of SCA and 3DS now, but still are ubiquitous. Like you can use them to pay online, offline. Open banking still has to win that, has to find its own space and win the customer trust. If I have to come to a website, I need to give my banking details. And as a consumer, it's like, why is that the case? I need to trust the merchant. So working with the ecosystem on establishing that trust, and there are the two models, I would say, like the white label versus the trusty example of a more branded solution. How do you bring trust to consumers? And then you layer on top the user experience that has been developed over the years. And I think now we are at a very good point where we have an e-commerce solution that is almost a pair of what credit and debit cards can offer. I think really having some catalyst merchants, some use cases that really show for e-commerce solutions that open banking can work, can add value. And then it's going to take some time to get customers to continue using it. It's not just the first time, like you need to make sure that customers go back and use it. But overall, I've seen the ecosystem growing. I still think that we're a little behind compared to the expectations and promises that we've been having. But overall, like it's good to have the conversations and make sure that we collectively work on the main pain points and the opportunities that we have.
Cool. I think I completely agree with your points, and to your point, right, Olof, I think open banking is fundamental technology, right? Sort of a foundation for something, and it's going through the stages of adoption. Obviously, just like you mentioned, blockchain. Here's the technology, and everyone is trying to figure out, how to use it, what to use it for. That's why I also believe that open banking is in the very early stages of adoption. We do see, and also it's regarding the fragmentation, right? We agree that there's UK and there's EU and different countries, and it's still localized, and even within the European Economic Area, it's still fragmented, right? So geographically, it's fragmented. If you look at open banking capabilities from the perspective of merchant or end user, again, those are two different perspectives. Cheaper for the merchant, more cumbersome for the user, or is it more cumbersome for the user given the 3DS and the online experience, all of the compliance that protects the end users, right, from fraud and so on and so forth. So the fact is that yes, if you look at open banking as a simple payment method, it's still very fragmented. Yeah, and still there's a lot of questions. Why would users use it? To be fair, yes, some countries, the Baltics, the Nordics, ideal in the Netherlands, some countries are used to account-to-account payments, and users are used to logging into banks to confirm a payment. But fundamentally, it's just still a capability that will enable something. What we do see from our experience at Connectpay, enabling platforms, we have a couple of prospects, a couple of customers that are trying to solve this exact thing, right? Here's huge value for a big merchant, which pays, has a lot of cost in card acquiring. Can you solve that somehow with open banking and drastically reduce the cost of acquiring? But then the question of, incentivizing the user comes. So we see a lot of companies, quite a few actually, trying to solve that incentive question. What should it be? What type of loyalty program should it be? How big does the merchant need to be able to actually steer the user towards using open banking instead of card payments? So again, it's a fundamental technology. I strongly agree that it's in the very early stages of adoption, and we will see a lot more different types of businesses being built on top of that capability, which should make things work.
I mean, I think that it's already today the case that you can, at least in Sweden, it would be perfectly possible to have a site that only runs on bank payments. That's the only payment method. I'm absolutely sure if you have a good enough product to sell. I don't think anybody is actually building a business on the basis of wowing their consumers with, all the cool payment methods they offer, right? Unless it's something you need to work, right? Wanted to just pick up on that point you made, Matteo, that when it comes to brand, obviously we have chosen to make a branded solution. I think that we already have a little bit of flexibility in terms of co-branding and things like that. But fundamentally, as you said, like the consumer needs to trust, right? But you need to have trust in a brand that you believe can deliver that. So if you take, I would argue and say Coca-Cola is probably one of the strongest consumer brands in the world, right? If they start a dentist practice, would you necessarily go there? Well, not so sure, right? If you're doing e-commerce, should you also do payment? Not so sure. But if you build a payment brand and you have that end user, connection, and then yes, I think you can definitely have the credibility, and that's why I think branded payment solution makes a lot of sense. But I mean, some of the use cases we have seen that have been the most powerful is when you have a merchant that is, I want to actively work with my payment mix, and you realize that we had an example of one of our in our fashion portfolio where they actually forced a lot of consumers over to open banking. I think we reached like 35% or so of the cashier. There was very, very little impact actually on the top line, so they were still kind of growing similarly. I think conversion rate was high, but they already had quite high conversion rate. But what actually happened was the return rates went down quite a lot. So people were less inclined to ship the goods back, right? And so the payment mix for them became very, very compelling use case on a bottom line basis. So I think like working with the technology as a merchant, you can actually influence your consumers quite a lot without sort of losing out.
I agree with my colleagues, and I will just mention that in addition to the works linked with technology, like the quality of API and the standardization, it is important also to have in mind that we have a challenge in the field of information and communication. In several European countries like France, we see a huge interest of demand actors, retailers, merchants, and corporate treasurers about open banking, but they don't have enough information to have a real strategical initiative about this topic. So it is important to foster information about this topic. And if we think about the end user, it is also the case, because it is important to promote a real culture of change. And this reality has been identified by the European Commission, since the culture of change has been integrated in the works to prepare the future PSD3.
And one thing about adoption and this education piece, I think if you look at the successful examples, like Ideal again, the success there was also because it was driven by the banks. Like banks came together, decided, okay, let's work on these payment methods, and then also brought it to market. I think what we are missing in a way is that distribution from the bank side. That's also a bit because of the fragmentation, not just at the market level, but also at the provider level. We have good competition, but that competition comes also with more challenges in terms of education. Because trustly, you are educating customers in a certain way, other providers might do it in a different way. So consumers are facing that diversity of information that doesn't necessarily help to go towards a common goal that is, okay, I can pay with my bank account. So I think trying to find a little bit of a more common denominator across the industry, and maybe more standardization that exists at the bank level, but maybe the layer before, where the customer is first interacting with open banking, can help to win them over.
I think education is a really important point, of course. I think it's also you've got to be very careful how you balance education and providing information without also disrupting the payment journey and the payment flow, and then the consumer experience actually making a payment. The product that we have implemented, we've got sort of an option through the payment journey where consumers can find out more information if they want to, but they don't break away as well from the actual payment flow. So it's an option for inquisitive customers to learn more about the payment method without dropping out. But I think probably just coming back as well to the actual what the value is to the consumer, because I get asked this question a lot. I think we always compare account-to-account payment solutions to card, and understandably, but there's a real good opportunity to use open banking payments to massively improve the journey for what are today manual bank transfers. There are still so many businesses out there that take payments through manual bank transfer. I've got a couple of invoices sitting at home now to pay, and it's such a pain. If somebody could just send me a link and I just click and do a payment from my bank account, it's great. Yeah. And then also sort of what's in it as an alternative. Of course, credit card is very unlikely as a consumer. I imagine a lot of us here use our credit cards for most of our purchases because of the associated rewards. I do. But there are scenarios where I would definitely use account-to-account payments with or without rewards. And I think the real key thing for me, two things at the moment as an alternative to card payments. So if we think about alternative to debit cards, so typically debit card users, one is during the consumer's authentication journey. It's such a nice journey with an open banking payment to achieve strong customer authentication, two-factor authentication, by just logging into your mobile bank account. We do it all the time. So it's a really easy, familiar way to achieve that really secure payment method. And also in this sort of squeezed economy, squeezed families at the moment, probably sort of low earning families who want to have sort of better control over their finances, having that the ability to, with the majority of banks, appreciate not all, but where you can see your balance before you commit to make a purchase. I think there really are benefits to the consumer.
And I think that the consumer value proposition is so critical. I love open banking, but I'm also a consumer in North America, and there are three reasons why cards could be more attractive than open banking. One is the rewards, in the form of air miles and other goodies that could be as high as 3-4%, which is not insignificant. The second is the rights of chargeback in case of disputes, in case of non-delivery, and in fact, PSD3 will be looking at ways for dispute resolution. In fact, it's one of the questions, how does open banking handle disputes and chargebacks? And it is a concern, and that's why either a modified version of PSD2 or PSD3 will look into disputes and chargebacks. And the third one is the 3 months of charge-free financing. Those are the three reasons why I would prefer cards over open banking. But as the equation changes, I think that open banking will become more and more attractive to the consumer. Yeah. Maybe we can inject some of the questions from the audience. There is a question that says, why does an open banking payment cost more than a regulated card? First of all, I wasn't aware that an open banking payment could cost more, but if any of you want to comment on that.
I could take this. So I am not aware. I think the open banking payments are so cheap that it's just impossible. So Connectpay, we're based in Lithuania, and we have this very strong fintech community. I can tell you the competition is so tough. Pricing is zero, close to zero. Right?
Pricing to the merchant, you mean, right?
The merchant.
And the consumer, there is no
charge to consumer. So it's just become, open banking payments has become just a commodity. It's a capability that needs to be there, costs nothing, and you should have it to be competitive.
I think there is some cost. Obviously, if you work with a third-party providers like Trustly, you're gonna make money in some way. The core cost of open banking going directly to the bank, that's free, but as a merchant, you're not gonna go directly to thousands of banks. So there is that intermediation that needs to be remunerated. I think you're right, there is enough competition to bring the costs down. That is also a challenge for the industry, because if you don't have the margins that Visa, MasterCard have, it's also harder to bring more innovation to the market. Even on the bank side, they are forced to provide an API because regulation, but what is the reason to keep it up high uptime, provide added value services? So there have been conversations of having premium APIs with additional services to give some kind of additional revenue stream to the banks. But I think you need to remunerate the industry to facilitate the transactions. I think some cost is going to be there. Naturally, it's going to go down as there is more competition and the environment evolves. Possibly some consolidation between providers, but some cost is going to be there.
And I think that's right, and that's well put. I mean, people sometimes just equate open banking with payment initiation, and yes, there is no interchange there, and that can be cheap, but that is fundamentally a partial payment method at best. This is a technology piece. Like you can't operate on that basis. I also wanted to come back to some of the points you made, Daniel. I mean, when it comes to loyalty schemes and points and stuff like that, yes, there can be a way to keep the end user, but we have to also remember that somebody is actually paying for that, right? So you can't have, like, in the end, it's going to be the merchant that's paying for it. So I as a merchant can very well have a point scheme that I own, right? Why do I outsource that to American Express? I mean,
other consumers.
Yeah,
someone is paying for that.
So I don't really buy that point. I think that's just something we carry from how payments were set up, I don't know, 40 years ago.
If you look at it, rewards are more of a thing in the US. In Europe, they're hardly there. That's why open bank has more of a opportunity and a future in Europe, and that's why it's also growing more than in the US. You probably have a perspective between the two markets. Do you see the difference between the two in terms of growth of open banking? Also because of that difference versus rewards?
I mean, I think they work extremely differently. In the US, the US is our product in the US works fundamentally extremely different from the European one, where here we can make a push payment from a bank, and in the US it's actually pull with a guarantee attached to it. So there is some sort of almost like a credit decision. But actually, I also wanted to come back to the dispute point, because somebody asked that as well, and I think you mentioned it. And I mean, again, if you take this initiation only, then yes, it's a bit like fire and forget. Of course, it would be difficult, but actually, already in the regulation today of PSD2, I mean, we have a lot of cases where we help consumers to get money back from the bank itself, and the bank will have to pay that back. Fundamentally, it's the same protection you have as a chargeback. It's just that it's rare because it's a strong customer authentication, so it's much harder to actually commit fraud in the first place. So there will be few of those cases. But fundamentally, the liability kind of sits with the acquirer, would kind of still be there with kind of the bank. So I think that part will definitely be sorted. I don't think that's standardized right now, but you need to work with a provider that can help in that manner. But that also comes back a little bit to the branded point. If there is no brand, how do I actually make that happen, right? Who do I as a consumer actually interact with? And that's where I think there will be more maturity coming that will really help accelerate this. But of course, a lot of people talking about it, making it work, then that will build the gravity to actually make that happen as well. So.
And I should come in here as well. So with in developing and designing the bank pay solution, the consumer protection, being part of a bank as well, was a real sort of big topic that we considered. We've got a lot of the clients in Barclaycard payments are retail based, so we're developing a solution for a broad range of clients, but a lot of retailers in mind. So consumers buying goods and services that will then be delivered. So having something there that the consumer could sort of fall back on should something go wrong was really important. So we've introduced something, it's an insolvency guarantee. So should one of our clients become insolvent and a consumer buys goods that then that it's not fulfilled because the merchant's become insolvent, the consumer can claim from us and we'll give them a refund. And feel that's really important to have consumer trust and the real longevity of the product. So we've got a payment icon as well for the payment method that the consumer recognises and can associate with that level of protection.
Super. Maybe turning to some emerging innovations or opportunities such as account to account at POS, variable recurring payments, request to pay, and even the use of account information services. Any thoughts on where you see both opportunities and challenges in these new areas? Anyone that...
Concerning request to pay, yes, it's an interesting topic. We see that there is, in this topic, also an European project with the creation a few years ago of the scheme SEPA RTP. And there is, as in some interesting innovations in Europe, a diversity of visions about request to pay across the different countries, with some countries that identify opportunities in a B2B context. For instance, in France, where request to pay is seen as a huge opportunity to accelerate the equipment in electronic means of payments for corporate treasurers, for instance. And there is also some countries where request to pay is seen as an opportunity in a B2C context. It is a case, for instance, in Portugal, with an interesting illustration in Portugal, because in this country the SDD is not very popular. So Portuguese ecosystem see request to pay in combination with instant payment as interesting alternative to boost digitalization of transactions. And other illustration is the case of UK. In UK, we have also an opportunity in a B2C context, thanks to the context of crisis, and request to pay is seen, according to a report published by Mastercard a few years ago, as a strong asset to help consumers to deal with their spendings in a context of crisis. So I think that concerning request to pay, it will be also a challenge in the creation of pan-European vision about this issue.
Thank you, Andrea.
Something that you mentioned before as one of the advantages of traditional cards versus open banking is the ability to have financing, so delay your payments over a longer period of time. So something that open banking can enable, not on the payment initiation side, but more on the account information service piece, is giving access to third-party providers about the information that the customer has into their bank account. And that can help to drive more informed decisions from a credit perspective, moving away from the traditional credit bureaus and ways to assess the creditworthiness of a customer, and really looking at the individual customer level, what is their past history, their potential ability to repay payments, and build a new financing solution built on top of that.
I completely agree. I think products like revenue-based financing definitely can rely on account information services, which enables that. I think another point that you mentioned on the POS, we see that POS has transformed, is going in the direction of really being a software POS, right? It's just software now at the end of the day, which means, physically the chip or the magnetic stripe is not going to be needed anymore to pay at a location. Which means there is possibility for open banking to move into the area of retail payments. To my knowledge, that has not been solved yet, but I know a few companies that are working actively in the open banking space and have raised significant funding to try and tackle that problem specifically. When will it happen? Will we have our next unicorns that solve, POS, which will essentially address the very big question, card versus open banking? I think it's a very uneven fight right now, right? Open banking is online only. You have your card that connects 60,000 banks across the world. You're going to go to any country in the world. It's going to move cross borders. You're sure you're going to use it. You're sure you're going to be able to pay anywhere you go. So, and also you're going to be able to pay at a retail location. So it's a very uneven fight. So until I think retail is solved with open banking, we won't even be able to discuss card versus open banking.
Yeah, we actually have a solution for it in retail environment. You can initiate a payment. I don't think it's. I personally am not a sort of strong believer in that, to be honest with you, because I think that the card is so convenient, like in a physical environment. So until you can tokenize it fully, as kind of you're talking about, and you still need to fiddle with your phone, and it's a bit sort of too clunky. But I think on the point, on the question yet, I mean, data is becoming quite, also quite important here in the context of payment. And I think there are basically two things. One is that what you mentioned, Matteo, about credit decisions and being access the information. But it's also the other one is that, debit payment also can become a proof of identity in a strong way. And there are a number of use cases where you can use that. I think for ourselves with account information services, one of our strongest use cases is probably to set up a direct debit mandate, which is actually a working version of the sort of VRP that clearly isn't there yet, but you can do it now with sort of direct debit. And being able to set up that account in an automated way actually carries quite a bit of value, and that relies on, of course, account information services.
And I'd probably say, I think, go back to your original question, that I think there are lots of exciting sort of opportunities for the future with open banking. But for me, I think the real focus for us as providers of these services is to make the single immediate payment acceptance solutions for account to account easier to consume, either through more simple, really simple API integration journeys, or through having this capability on platforms, so more and more merchants can accept. I think what we need to find is something like the TFL for contactless to really see a big shift in consumer behavior and adoption.
Totally. And this brings us to the end of our panel. Please join me in thanking our panelists.